The November rain fell in sheets across Arlington National Cemetery, turning the manicured grass into a sea of dark green glass. Lieutenant Maxwell Hartford stood at attention, her marine dress blues perfectly pressed, her cover casting a shadow across eyes that hadn't slept in 3 days. The flag-draped casket before her held the body of Major Garrett Prescott, the man she'd called father for 26 years. 7 rifles cracked the air, once, twice, 3 times. The 21-gun salute echoed across the rows of white headstones, each one marking a promise kept, a duty fulfilled, a life given. Max didn't flinch. Marines didn't flinch. Not at funerals, not at the sound of gunfire, not when their world was collapsing around them. But when the honor guard began folding the flag, crisp, practiced movements that transformed the symbol of a nation into a perfect triangle, something inside her chest cracked. The officer approached her mother. Colonel Helen Prescott stood ramrod straight, despite being 20 pounds lighter than she'd been 6 months ago. Her silver hair was pulled back in the same severe bun she'd worn for 30 years. Her uniform bore the ribbons of 2 decades of service: Gulf War, Bosnia, Somalia. A career built on discipline and sacrifice. But when the officer extended the folded flag, Helen's hands trembled. On behalf of the President of the United States Marine Corps, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service. Helen took the flag. Her fingers gripped the fabric so tightly her knuckles went white. For just a moment, a fraction of a second that Max almost missed, her mother's eyes darted to Max's face, then away. Quickly, guiltily. It was the same look Helen had worn for 3 days. Ever since the call came from Quantico-based security, ever since they'd found Garrett's Jeep wrapped around a telephone pole on Route 1, his blood alcohol level at .15. Ever since Max had flown home from her posting at Camp Lejeune to bury the man who'd taught her how to tie her boots, how to field strip an M16, how to stand tall when the world tried to knock you down. The chaplain's voice droned on about duty and honor and eternal rest. Max heard none of it. She was watching her mother, watching the way Helen's jaw clenched, the way her breathing came too fast, too shallow, the way she refused, absolutely refused, to look at her daughter. Something was wrong. Not just grief. Max knew grief. She'd seen it in the eyes of Marines who'd lost brothers in Mogadishu. She'd felt it herself when her best friend from officer candidate school died in a training accident. Grief was heavy, crushing, all-consuming. This was different. This was fear. The reception at the Prescott House in Alexandria was a parade of uniforms and uncomfortable conversations. Officers who'd served with Garrett shuffled to the living room, their voices low, their condolences rehearsed. Max stood by the fireplace, a glass of water in her hand that she hadn't touched in an hour, accepting handshakes and half-hugs from people she barely knew. "Your father was a hell of an officer," said a retired colonel whose name Max couldn't remember. "Served his country with distinction." Max nodded, said thank you, watched him move on to the cheese plate. Garrett had been a hell of an officer. 22 years in the Corps, 2 combat deployments, a chest full of medals, a reputation for being tough but fair, demanding but loyal. He'd retired at 45, taken a civilian job at the Pentagon as a contractor, and spent his evenings teaching Max everything the Marine Corps hadn't. How to read a topographical map in the dark, how to calculate windage for a long-range shot, how to survive on nothing but a knife and her wits. Skills she'd needed in Bosnia, skills that had kept her alive when her convoy hit an ambush outside Sarajevo, skills a Pentagon contractor had no business knowing. She'd never questioned it before, never wondered why a man whose official service record listed him as a logistics officer could break down a Soviet-era AK-47 blindfolded, why he knew hand-to-hand combat techniques that weren't taught at Quantico, why he woke up sometimes at 3 in the morning, sweating through his sheets, muttering words in languages she didn't recognize. She'd assumed it was just residual trauma from the Gulf, assumed all veterans carried shadows they didn't talk about. But now, watching her mother avoid her eyes, feeling the weight of all those unasked questions pressing down on her chest, Max wasn't so sure. The last guess left at 8:15. Helen closed the door and stood with her back to it, her hands still on the knob, her shoulders rising and falling with each breath. "Mom," Max said quietly. Helen didn't turn around. "Mom, we need to talk about—" "I'm tired, Maxwell." Her mother's voice was flat, empty. "It's been a long day." "I know, but—" "Please." Helen's hand slipped from the doorknob. "Not tonight." She walked up the stairs without looking back. A moment later, Max heard her bedroom door close. Lock. Max stood alone in the living room, surrounded by half-empty plates of food and flowers that were already starting to wilt. The house smelled like lilies and coffee and something else. Something wrong. Like the air before a thunderstorm. Charged. Dangerous. She set down her water glass and climbed the stairs. The door to Garrett's study was closed. It had been closed for 3 days. Helen had locked it immediately after the notification, before Max even arrived from North Carolina. No reason given, just locked. Max tested the handle. Still locked. She stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence. Then she went to her childhood bedroom, retrieved a paper clip from her desk drawer, and returned to the study door. The lock was basic, standard residential hardware. She had it open in 30 seconds. The study looked exactly as it always had. Garrett's massive oak desk dominated the room, its surface clear except for a banker's lamp and a framed photo of Max's commissioning ceremony. Bookshelves lined 3 walls. Military history, tactical manuals, novels by Tom Clancy and Stephen Hunter. A map of the world hung behind the desk, marked with pins and locations Max assumed were old deployments. Everything normal. Everything exactly as it should be. Except the filing cabinet in the corner. The bottom drawer was slightly open, just an inch, like someone had closed it in a hurry and it hadn't latched properly. Max crossed the room and pulled it open. Files. Personnel records from Garrett's contracting work. Tax returns. Insurance documents. Nothing interesting. Nothing that explained the fear in Helen's eyes. Then her fingers brushed against something taped to the back of the drawer. A key. Small. Brass. The kind that opened a lockbox or a safe deposit box. There was a number engraved on the bow. 247. Max turned it over in her palm. Why would Garrett hide a key in his filing cabinet? Why not keep it on his keyring or in his wallet? Unless he didn't want anyone to find it. Unless he was hiding something. She pocketed the key and continued searching. 20 minutes later, she found it. A cardboard box, shoved behind a row of books on the top shelf, hidden behind a complete set of leather-bound military regulations that looked like they'd never been opened. The box was old, the corners worn, the tape yellowed and peeling. Max pulled it down and set it on the desk. Inside, photographs, dozens of them, all old, all faded. The first showed Garrett in uniform, but not a Marine uniform. The insignia was wrong. The cut of the jacket was wrong. He looked younger, maybe 30, and he was standing in front of a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Behind him, Max could see buildings that looked Eastern European, Soviet bloc architecture, gray and brutal. The second photo showed Garrett with a group of men, civilians. They were armed, AK-47s, pistols, gear that looked improvised and worn, not military, not official, contractors or mercenaries. Max's hands started to shake. The third photo was different. It showed a woman, young, maybe 24 or 25. She wore an army dress uniform, the old style from the early 70s. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. Her eyes were fierce and intelligent. She stood at attention, but there was something defiant in her posture. Something that suggested she didn't take orders easily. She was beautiful, and she was holding a baby. Max brought the photo closer to the lamp. The baby couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Tiny fists, eyes squeezed shut. The woman wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking down at the infant with an expression that made Max's throat tight. Love, and grief, and fear. Someone had written on the back of the photo in faded blue ink, Operation Homecoming, VR, March 1973. March 1973, Max did the math. 26 years ago, the month she was born. Her hands were definitely shaking now. She flipped through the rest of the box. More photos of Garrett in places he'd never mentioned. Document in languages she didn't read. A military dog tag that wasn't his. The name stamped into the metal was Rothschild, V, and the blood type was O positive. Not Prescott, Rothschild, V. Our Max sank into Garrett's leather chair, the box in her lap, her mind racing. Operation Homecoming. She knew that name. Everyone who'd served knew that name. It was a return of American POWs after Vietnam. February and March of 1973, hundreds of service members released from North Vietnamese prisons and brought home to American soil. But Garrett had never served in Vietnam. His official records showed him stationed stateside during the war. Logistics, supply chain management, nothing that would put him in Southeast Asia. So why did he have photos labeled Operation Homecoming? And who was VR? She studied the woman's face again. There was something familiar about her features, the set of her jaw, the intensity in her eyes. Something that tugged at Max's memory, but she couldn't place it. The baby's face was partially obscured by a blanket, but Max could see one tiny arm extending from the bundle. On the wrist, so small it was almost invisible, was a birthmark. Dark, distinctive, shaped like a crescent moon. Max's breath caught. Slowly, she set down the photo and pushed up the left sleeve of her dress blues. There on her wrist, in the exact same position, a crescent moon birthmark. The room tilted. Max gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. No, it couldn't be. She looked at the photo again, looked at the date, March 1973, the month she was born, the woman holding a baby, the birthmark, VR, not Helen. Helen's maiden name was Carmichael. Her middle initial was J, not R. Max had seen her own birth certificate, seen it 100 times. Baby girl, born March 15, 1973, at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Parents, Major Garrett Prescott and Captain Helen Prescott. Except now, looking at this photo, at this woman who wasn't her mother, holding a baby who had Max's birthmark, that birth certificate felt like a lie. Max didn't sleep that night. She sat on her childhood bed, still covered with the same quilted comforter she'd had in high school, and stared at the photo until the numbers on her alarm clock read 0430. The woman's face was burned into her brain now, the way she held the baby, the sadness in her eyes, the Army uniform that said this was someone official, someone real, someone who existed in records and databases. VR. At 0500, Max got dressed. Civilian clothes, jeans, a sweatshirt, boots. She slipped the photo into her jacket pocket, along with the key and the dog tag, and left the house before Helen woke up. The streets of Alexandria were empty. A few delivery trucks, a handful of early commuters. Max drove on autopilot, her mind still trying to process what she'd found, what it meant, what it couldn't possibly mean because the alternative was impossible. She pulled into a 24-hour diner off Route 1 and ordered coffee she didn't drink. Sat in a corner booth and pulled out her phone. She had contacts, people she'd served with, people who owed her favors. A gunnery sergeant at Quantico who could access personnel records. A captain at the Pentagon who worked in archives. A retired intel officer who'd taught one of her classes at Officer Candidate School and told her to call if she ever needed anything. She called the intel officer first. His name was Captain, now Major, Wyatt Garrison. He was 32, career Marine, assigned to the intelligence division at Quantico. Max had stayed in touch with him over the years. Professional correspondence, the occasional email about doctrine updates or training protocols. She'd never asked him for a personal favor before. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, his voice rough with sleep. Garrison. Sir, it's Lieutenant Hartford. Max kept her voice steady, professional, like she wasn't sitting in a diner at 0530 asking him to break about 6 different regulations. I apologize for the early call. I need your help with something. There was a pause, then, Hartford, I heard about your father. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, sir. What do you need? Max took a breath. I need you to run a name for me. Military personnel, Army, likely, active or retired in 1973, last name Rothschild, first initial V, blood type O positive. Another pause, longer this time. Hartford, I know what it is, sir, and I know what I'm asking. Does this have something to do with your father? I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to find out. Wyatt exhaled slowly. Give me 2 hours. I'll call you back. Thank you, sir. She hung up and stared at her untouched coffee. 2 hours. 120 minutes to sit with the possibility that everything she knew about herself was wrong. That Garrett and Helen had lied to her for 26 years. That somewhere out there was a woman named VR who might be her real mother. The waitress refilled her cup. Max nodded thanks and pulled the photo out again. Studied every detail. The woman's uniform. The hospital bracelet visible on her wrist. The building in the background. Institutional. Military, but Max couldn't identify which base. Operation Homecoming. She pulled out her phone again and searched the term. Found exactly what she'd expected, the return of POWs from Vietnam. February through March 1973, 591 service members repatriated. A national celebration, a closing of one of the darkest chapters in American military history. But the photo in her hand didn't show anything about Vietnam. The woman's uniform was pristine. Her face showed no signs of imprisonment or torture. She looked like someone at a regular hospital, having a regular baby. So why label it Operation Homecoming? Unless Max's fingers flew across her phone screen. She searched for classified operations, code names, black ops programs, found references to dozens of missions that had nothing to do with the war. Operations in Eastern Europe, South America, the Middle East. Cold War games played in shadows, while the public focused on the jungle. Could Operation Homecoming have been something else? A code name for a different kind of return? A different kind of rescue? Her phone buzzed. 90 minutes had passed. Wyatt was calling back early. Hartford. His voice was tight. Careful. We need to meet in person, not over the phone. Max's heart kicked against her ribs. You found something. I found a lot of things. None of them make sense. And some of them are flagged with security classifications I haven't seen since I worked counterintelligence. Where? Quantico. Main gate. 30 minutes. He hung up. Max threw $20 on the table and ran for her car. Wyatt Garrison looked like every career intelligence officer Max had ever met. Average height, average build, average features that made him instantly forgettable in a crowd. But his eyes were sharp, the kind of sharp that came from years of reading classified reports and connecting dots that weren't supposed to be connected. He was waiting for her in the parking lot of a McDonald's 2 miles from Quantico Base. When Max pulled up beside his truck, he motioned for her to get in. She slid into the passenger seat. Wyatt handed her a file folder. You need to tell me what the hell you've stumbled into, he said without preamble. Max opened the folder. Inside was a personnel file. The header read, Rothschild, Victoria, rank, Lieutenant, U.S. Army, born 1949, service dates 1971 to 1974. The photo stapled to the front page showed the same woman from the picture in Garrett's study. Younger here, maybe 22, but definitely the same person. Victoria Rothschild, Wyatt said, Army Intelligence, stationed at Fort Meade from 1971 to 1973, then transferred to classified assignment. Then nothing. Her record goes dark in March of 1973. Dark how? As in wiped, redacted. Every document from March 73 onward is either missing or sealed under executive order. I've got clearance for a lot of things, Hartford. I don't have clearance for this. Max flipped through the pages. Service commendations, fitness reports, standard personnel documentation, until March 1973. Then blank pages, redaction stamps, whole sections blacked out. What kind of work was she doing? Max asked. According to what's left of her file, intelligence analysis, Eastern European desk. But that's cover work. Nobody gets their records sealed for analyzing radio intercepts. So what was she really doing? Wyatt shook his head. I don't know, but I can tell you this. Whatever operation she was part of, it was serious enough that somebody very high up wanted it buried. And not just buried, burned, erased, like it never happened. Max's hands were shaking again. She set the folder down and pulled out the photo from Garrett's study, handed it to Wyatt. He studied it for a long moment, then looked at Max, then back at the photo. That's her, he said quietly. That's Rothschild. And that baby has the same birthmark I do. Max pushed up her sleeve, showed him the crescent moon on her wrist. Wyatt went very still. Hartford, what are you telling me? I don't know what I'm telling you. I found this in my father's study, along with about 20 other photos I can't explain. Documents in foreign languages, a dog tag with Rothschild's name on it, and this. She held up the key, hidden in his filing cabinet. Wyatt took the key, turned it over. 247. Could be a safe deposit box, could be a storage unit, could be anything. My father died 3 days ago, Max said. Her voice was steady but barely. My mother has been acting strange ever since, avoiding me, afraid of something. And now I find out that there's a woman named Victoria Rothschild who had a baby in March of 1973, the same month I was born, and then disappeared into classified records. You think you're that baby? It wasn't a question, but Max answered anyway. I think I need to find out. Wyatt was quiet for a long time. Then he started the truck. There's someone we need to talk to, someone who might remember Victoria Rothschild, someone who was around Fort Meade in the early 70s. Who? A retired colonel, name's Sullivan. He ran counterintelligence for the Army back then. If anybody knows what happened to Rothschild, it's him. Will he talk to us? Wyatt's expression was grim. I don't know, but if he does, Hartford, you need to be prepared for what he might say, because people don't get their records burned for good reasons. Max stared out the window at the gray Virginia morning. Prepared. She was a Marine officer. She trained for combat, survived ambushes, led troops under fire. But nothing had prepared her for the possibility that her entire life was built on a lie. Drive, she said. Wyatt pulled onto the highway. Behind them, the sun was starting to rise over Quantico, casting long shadows across the base where Max had spent the last 3 months trying to prove herself, trying to show her male colleagues that women belonged in the Corps, that they could lead, could fight, could make the hard calls. She'd thought that was the hardest battle she'd face. She'd been wrong. The hardest battle was about to begin, and the enemy wasn't across an ocean or behind enemy lines. The enemy was the truth. Colonel Thomas Sullivan lived in a modest ranch house in Fredericksburg, 40 minutes south of Quantico. The front yard was immaculate, military precision evident in every trimmed hedge and perfectly edged walkway. An American flag hung from a pole by the front door, the fabric crisp and new, replaced regularly like a man who still believed in symbols. Wyatt knocked twice. Heavy footsteps approached from inside, accompanied by the clicking of a dog's nails on hardwood. The door opened to reveal a man in his mid-70s, still straight-backed despite age, still carrying himself like someone who'd spent a lifetime giving orders. Sullivan's eyes flicked from Wyatt to Max, lingering on her face for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or concern. "Captain Garrison," Sullivan said, his voice gravelly but strong. "This is unexpected. Sir, I apologize for the intrusion. This is Lieutenant Maxwell Hartford, Marine Corps. We need to ask you about someone you might have known. Fort Meade, early 70s. Sullivan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That was a long time ago." "Yes, sir, but we think it's important." The old colonel studied them both for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. "Come in." The living room was what Max expected. Functional furniture, military memorabilia on the walls, bookshelves lined with histories of wars and campaigns. A golden retriever padded over to sniff her hand. Max scratched behind its ears automatically, her attention fixed on Sullivan as he lowered himself into an armchair. "Fort Meade," he said. "What specifically are you asking about?" Max pulled out the photo and handed it to him. Sullivan's reaction was immediate. His hand trembled slightly as he took the photograph. His eyes widened. His breathing changed. "Where did you get this?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "My father's personal effects," Max said. "Major Garrett Prescott. He died 3 days ago." Sullivan looked up sharply. "Prescott is dead? You knew him?" "I knew of him." Sullivan set the photo on the coffee table like it might burn his fingers. "He wasn't someone you forgot. What do you know about this picture?" "Nothing. That's why we're here. The woman is Lieutenant Victoria Rothschild, Army Intelligence. The date on the back says March 1973, Operation Homecoming." Sullivan stood abruptly and walked to the window. He stood there for a long moment, his back to them, staring out at his perfect lawn. "Operation Homecoming wasn't what you think it was," he finally said. Max leaned forward. "Sir? The public Operation Homecoming, the POW returns. That was real. That happened. But it was also cover. Deep cover for something else entirely." Wyatt pulled out a notebook. Sullivan noticed and shook his head. "No notes, Captain. What I'm about to tell you stays in this room. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Sullivan returned to his chair. The dog settled at his feet, sensing the tension. In 1973, the Cold War was at its peak. We had assets all over Eastern Europe, intelligence officers, operatives, people gathering information on Soviet military capabilities, nuclear programs, political movements. Most of them were men, but we also had women, damn good ones, smart, brave, better at the work than most of the men, if I'm being honest. He picked up the photo again, his thumb tracing the edge. Victoria Rothschild was one of the best. 24 years old, fluent in Russian and German, photographic memory. She could analyze intercepts faster than anyone I'd ever seen. We sent her to East Germany in late 1971. Official cover was diplomatic assistant at the American mission in West Berlin. Real job was running a network of sources on the other side of the wall. Max's pulse quickened. "What happened to her?" "She got compromised." Sullivan's voice was flat, factual, like he was reading from a report. "Spring of 1972. We still don't know how. Maybe one of her sources was a double. Maybe the Stasi got lucky. But they identified her, started watching her, and she made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" Sullivan's eyes met Max's. "She fell in love." The words hung in the air. "There was an American diplomat, young guy, rising star, came from a political family, good connections, destined for bigger things. He was assigned to the West Berlin mission around the same time as Rothschild. They worked together, got close, too close. They had a relationship," Wyatt said. "They had more than a relationship. They had a liability." Sullivan set the photo down again. Rothschild got pregnant in late 1972, and when she reported it to her handlers, everything went to hell. Max felt something cold settle in her chest. Why? Because the diplomat wasn't just some random guy. His father was a senator, a powerful one. The family had presidential ambitions, and having a son who knocked up an intelligence officer in the middle of a classified operation, that was a scandal that could destroy careers, destroy dynasties. So what did they do? Max's voice was steady, but her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. They pulled her out, brought her back to the States in January 1973, put her in a military hospital under a fake name, told her the baby would be adopted out quietly, clean, no records, no trail. She'd go back to work after recovery. The diplomat would continue his career, and nobody would ever know. But that's not what happened. Sullivan shook his head. Rothschild agreed at first. She didn't have a choice. But when the baby was born in March, she changed her mind, refused to sign the adoption papers, said she'd go public if they tried to take her child, would tell the press everything, the operation, the diplomat, all of it. So they took the baby anyway, Wyatt said quietly. Not exactly. Sullivan's expression darkened. The diplomat's family got involved, brought in their own people, private contractors, men who knew how to make problems disappear. Max's voice came out hoarse. Garrett Prescott. Prescott was former military, special operations, the kind of skills that didn't show up in his official record because most of his work was off-book. After he left the service, he went private, took contracts that needed discretion. The diplomat's family hired him to eliminate the problem. The room spun. Max gripped the chair harder, forcing herself to breathe. Eliminate, she repeated. You mean kill? That was the contract. Make the baby disappear. Permanently. Clean up the mess before it became a scandal. Sullivan looked at Max with something like pity in his eyes. But Prescott didn't do it. What? He went to the hospital. Walter Reed, March 15, 1973, walked into the maternity ward with forged paperwork saying he was authorized to take the infant for a medical procedure. Rothschild was sedated. They'd given her something strong after the birth, kept her knocked out so she couldn't make trouble. The nurse on duty was supposed to stop him, supposed to verify the paperwork, but she didn't. Max's mind raced. Helen, my mother was a nurse. Sullivan nodded. Captain Helen Carmichael, Army nurse, stationed at Walter Reed. She and Prescott had served together before. She knew what kind of man he was, and when he showed up with those papers, asking her to help him take a newborn out of the hospital, she knew exactly what was happening. She helped him kidnap me. Max's voice was hollow. She helped him save you, Sullivan corrected. Prescott was supposed to kill that baby. Instead, he took her home. He and Helen forged adoption papers, created a paper trail that showed they'd legally adopted a child through military channels, and they raised her as their own. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the dog seemed to sense it, pressing closer to Sullivan's legs. Max stood, walked to the window, stared out at the same perfect lawn Sullivan had been looking at minutes before. Her reflection stared back at her. A woman in civilian clothes, brown hair pulled back, jaw set in the same stubborn line that Garrett always said made her look like a warrior. Except she wasn't Garrett's daughter, wasn't Helen's daughter, was the child of a woman she'd never met and a man whose family had ordered her killed. Who was he? She asked, not turning around. The diplomat. Sullivan was quiet for a long time. You sure you want to know? Yes. His name is Harrison Blackwell. He's a senator now, been in Congress since 1985, currently running for president. Max turned slowly. Senator Blackwell, from Virginia. The same. She'd seen him on television, watched his campaign ads. He was running on a platform of military strength, traditional values, American leadership on the world stage. His face was on billboards across the state. His voice filled radio ads promising to restore honor to Washington, and he'd paid to have her murdered. "Does he know I'm alive?" Max asked. Sullivan shook his head. "I doubt it. As far as anyone official knows, that baby disappeared in March 1973 and was never seen again. Prescott and your mother, Helen, they did a good job. New birth certificate, new records, everything looked legitimate. You became their daughter, legally, officially. What happened to Victoria Rothschild?" "They told her the baby died. Complications during delivery. By the time she came out of sedation, there was a death certificate and a burial record. She had a breakdown, spent 3 months in a psychiatric facility. When she recovered, the Army quietly discharged her, gave her an honorable separation and a confidentiality agreement. She signed it, disappeared. You're telling me my mother thinks I'm dead?" "Your mother thought you were dead for 26 years, until about 3 months ago." Max spun around. "What?" Sullivan stood and walked to a bookshelf, pulled down a file folder that had been wedged between 2 thick histories of World War II. He handed it to Max. "This came across my desk 2 months ago. I'm still on the list for certain classified briefings. Force of habit. The Army likes to keep retired intelligence officers in the loop on matters that might affect ongoing operations." Max opened the folder. Inside was a personnel file. Current, active duty, Rothschild, Victoria. Rank, Brigadier General, U.S. Army. Current assignment, Commanding Officer, Officer Candidate School, Quantico, Virginia. The photo showed a woman in her early 50s. Same fierce eyes from the picture in Garrett's study. Same determined jawline. But older now, harder. The kind of face that had seen too much and survived it anyway. "She came back," Max whispered. "She never really left," Sullivan said. "After the discharge, she changed her name. Went to graduate school. Got a PhD in military strategy. Wrote papers that caught the attention of the Pentagon. In 1985, they offered her a consultant position. By 1990, she was back in uniform. Rebuilt her career from scratch. Made general last year. And now she's at Quantico. Assigned 3 months ago. Specifically requested the posting." Wyatt leaned forward. "Why Quantico? Why now?" Sullivan looked at Max. "Because of you. You were posted to Camp Lejeune until June, then transferred to Quantico in August for advanced officer training. Your name went through the system, your personnel file, your photo. She saw my file. She saw your birth date, March 15th, 1973. Saw that you were raised by Garrett and Helen Prescott. And she saw your service photo." Sullivan pointed at Max's wrist. "That birthmark shows up in the picture. Same one her daughter had." Max felt like she'd been punched. "She knows. She suspects. She can't prove it. Can't demand a DNA test without raising questions she can't answer. Can't approach you without revealing classified information that's still sealed under national security protocols. But she knows. That's why she requested Quantico," Wyatt said slowly. "She wanted to be close." Sullivan nodded. "And that's why she enrolled her daughter in the dependent school where you volunteer." Max's head snapped up. "Her daughter?" "Emma Rothschild, 7 years old. Enrolled at the Quantico Dependent School 6 weeks ago. Your mother, Victoria, brings her to school every morning, picks her up every afternoon." The memory hit Max like a freight train. The new student, small, quiet, dark hair and serious eyes. Max had noticed her on the first day of the fall semester. Had made a point to introduce herself because the girl looked so lost. Emma. She'd sat in Max's classroom during volunteer hours, drawn pictures of horses and castles, asked Max questions about being a Marine, told her that her mother was a general and that she wanted to be a soldier too when she grew up. And Max had smiled and told her she could be anything she wanted. Never knowing that the woman who picked Emma up each day, the general who nodded politely at Max but never spoke, never came closer than necessary, was her own mother. Her real mother. The woman who'd spent 26 years thinking her daughter was dead. Emma, Max said. Who is Emma? Sullivan's expression shifted, became carefully neutral. That's where things get complicated. More complicated than everything else you just told me? Emma isn't Victoria's biological daughter. The words landed like another blow. What? Victoria adopted Emma 5 years ago. The girl's biological parents were killed in a car accident. No other family. She was going into foster care. Victoria stepped in, filed for adoption. The whole process was legal and above board. But what? Sullivan hesitated. The biological parents were a young couple, military, stationed at Fort Bragg. They didn't have much money, lived paycheck to paycheck. And according to the adoption records, they'd tried for years to have a child, finally succeeded through IVF. Emma was their miracle baby. I don't understand, Max said. The couple who died, their names were Stephen and Rachel Monroe. Good people, dedicated soldiers. But here's the thing, they were also desperate. Desperate enough that when someone approached them with a proposition, they took it. Wyatt's voice was sharp. What kind of proposition? Money, $50,000, in exchange for allowing a wealthy couple to use their names as surrogates for an IVF pregnancy. The wealthy couple would provide the egg and sperm. The Monroes would carry the pregnancy to term, sign over parental rights at birth, and walk away with enough money to pay off their debts and start fresh. Max felt sick. Who were the wealthy couple? The adoption agency won't say. The records are sealed. But here's what I know. Emma was born in 1998. The Monroes raised her for 2 years. Then they died in 2000. And within 6 months, Victoria Rothschild filed for adoption. You think Victoria arranged it? Max said slowly. The IVF, the surrogacy, all of it. I think Victoria lost a daughter in 1973 and spent the next 25 years trying to get her back. When she couldn't, she found another way. She created a daughter, used her money and connections to arrange a surrogacy, then waited until the right moment to step in and claim the child as her own. That's insane. That's grief, Sullivan said quietly. Grief makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise consider. Victoria Rothschild is one of the most capable officers I've ever known. But losing you broke something in her. And when people break, they don't always heal clean. Max sank back into her chair. Her mind was reeling. Too much information. Too many revelations. Too many lies built on top of lies. Why are you telling me this? She asked Sullivan. You could have kept all of this buried. Because Prescott is dead. And with him gone, the story is going to come out. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but eventually, someone is going to connect the dots. Blackwell's campaign is generating scrutiny, journalists digging into his past, opposition researchers looking for skeletons, and this skeleton is big enough to destroy him. You think they'll find out about me? I think they'll find out about Operation Homecoming, about Victoria, about the baby that disappeared. And when they do, they're going to start asking questions, questions that will lead them to you. Wyatt's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression changed. Hartford, we need to go. Now. What is it? Security alert from Quantico. Someone just tried to access Garrett Prescott's personnel file, flagged it as a potential breach. They're locking down all related records pending investigation. Who tried to access it? Wyatt's jaw tightened. The request came from Senator Blackwell's office. The room went silent. Sullivan stood slowly. They know. Somehow they know Prescott is dead, and they're trying to figure out what he might have left behind. Max felt a cold clarity settle over her. They're going to come after me. They're going to try to contain the situation, Sullivan corrected, which means making sure nothing surfaces that could damage Blackwell's campaign. You're a loose end, Lieutenant, and people like Blackwell don't leave loose ends. Wyatt was already moving toward the door. We need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere off base, somewhere they can't find you. But Max wasn't moving. She was staring at the file folder in her hands, at Victoria Rothschild's service photo, at the face of the mother she'd never known. "No," she said. Wyatt stopped. "Hartford, no, I'm not running. I'm not hiding. If Blackwell wants to come after me, let him come. But first I'm going to get answers, real answers, from the one person who can give them to me." "Victoria," Sullivan said. Max stood, tucked the file under her arm. "Where can I find her?" "Her office is in Barracks 2 at Quantico." "But Hartford, you can't just walk in there and—" "Watch me." She was out the door before either of them could stop her. Wyatt caught up with her at his truck, grabbing her arm. "This is a bad idea," he said. "You're not thinking clearly." Max pulled free. "I'm thinking perfectly clearly. For the first time in 3 days. My father, the man I thought was my father, he's dead. My mother isn't my mother. My real mother has been 20 miles away for 3 months, and I didn't know it. And somewhere out there is a senator who paid to have me killed and who's about to become president. So yes, I'm going to walk into that office. I'm going to look Victoria Rothschild in the eye, and I'm going to ask her if I'm her daughter. And if Blackwell's people are already there, if this is a trap, then I'll deal with it. I'm a Marine, Wyatt. I don't run from fights." He studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine, but I'm coming with you. And if this goes sideways, we do it my way. Understood?" "Understood." They drove back to Quantico in silence. Max stared out the window, watching Virginia roll past. Trees stripped bare by November cold, fields gone brown and dormant, the landscape waiting for winter. She thought about Garrett, about the man who'd raised her, who'd taught her to shoot and to fight and to stand up for what was right. He'd been living with this secret for 26 years, had woken up every day knowing he'd stolen a child, knowing powerful people wanted him dead, knowing that one day the truth might surface. And he'd loved her anyway, raised her anyway, given her everything he had. Was that enough? Could love built on a lie still be real? She didn't know. Wasn't sure she'd ever know. They reached Quantico at 1300 hours. Wyatt used his credentials to get them through the gate. The base was busy, Marines in training, officers moving between buildings, the constant hum of military life. Familiar, comforting, except nothing felt comfortable anymore. Barracks 2 was a 3-story brick building near the center of the base. The Officer Candidate School administrative offices occupied the second floor. Wyatt led Max through the main entrance and up the stairs. They passed a handful of officers who nodded at Wyatt and gave Max curious glances. Victoria Rothschild's office was at the end of a long hallway. The door was open. Max stopped just outside, took a breath, then knocked. "Enter," a voice called from inside. Max stepped through the doorway and saw her for the first time. Brigadier General Victoria Rothschild sat behind a standard-issue military desk, covered in paperwork and reports. She wore her uniform with the kind of precision that came from decades of service. Her dark hair was threaded with silver, pulled back in a regulation bun. Her face showed the lines of age and stress, but her eyes, those fierce, intelligent eyes from the photograph, were exactly the same. She looked up from her work, saw Max, and went absolutely still. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Victoria's expression didn't change, but her hand trembled slightly as she set down her pen. "Lieutenant Hartford," she said finally. Her voice was controlled, professional, but there was something underneath, something breaking. "I was wondering when you'd come." Max stepped fully into the office. Behind her, Wyatt closed the door. "You know who I am," Max said, not a question. Victoria stood slowly. "I know who you might be, who I think you are, who I've hoped you were for 3 months. My father died 3 days ago, Garrett Prescott. He left behind a box of photographs. One of them showed you holding a baby in March 1973. A baby with this." Max pushed up her sleeve, showing the birthmark. Victoria's composure cracked. Just slightly, just enough that Max could see the woman underneath the general. The mother underneath the officer. "I thought you were dead," Victoria whispered. "They told me you died. I held you for 10 minutes before they sedated me, and when I woke up, you were gone. They showed me a death certificate, a burial record. I believed them for 26 years, until you saw my file. Until I saw your file, your birth date, your parents' names, that birthmark in your service photo. And I knew. Somehow, impossibly, I knew." Max felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't realized was locked tight. "Are you my mother?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Yes." The word hung between them. Simple, devastating, true. "Then we need to talk," Max said, "because the man who paid to have me killed is running for president, and he just tried to access Garrett Prescott's files, which means he knows something, which means we're all in danger." Victoria's expression hardened, the general returning, the mother stepping aside for the soldier. "Tell me everything," she said, and Max did. Victoria Rothschild listened without interrupting. She stood perfectly still behind her desk, hands clasped behind her back in parade rest, face carefully neutral. But Max could see the tension in her jaw, the way her breathing changed when Max mentioned Blackwell's name, the slight tremor in her fingers when Max described the contents of Garrett's box. When Max finished, Victoria walked to the window. Quantico spread out below them, Marines in formation, vehicles moving between buildings, the organized chaos of a military base at full operation. A world Victoria had fought to rejoin, a world she'd rebuilt herself to inhabit. "Harrison Blackwell," she said finally, her voice flat. "I haven't spoken that name in 26 years. Wyatt shifted in his chair. "General, with all due respect, we need to know what happened. The full story, not the version in the classified files." Victoria turned from the window. "The full story is treason, Captain. Mine and his both. You sure you want to hear it?" "Yes, ma'am." She moved to her desk, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a bottle of bourbon in 3 glasses, poured 2 fingers in each without asking, handed them to Max and Wyatt. "I met Harrison Blackwell in November 1971, she began. "West Berlin. I was 22. He was 26. His father had arranged for him to work at the American mission as a political affairs assistant. My cover was diplomatic liaison. In reality, I was running sources in East Germany, trying to identify Soviet military installations, nuclear capabilities, the usual Cold War chess game." She took a drink. Max did the same, feeling the burn. "Harrison was everything I wasn't. Rich, connected, confident in a way that only comes from never having to prove yourself. His future was mapped out. State Department, then Congress, maybe the White House. My future was classified briefings and coded messages and living in the shadows. We shouldn't have worked, but we did." "You fell in love," Max said quietly. "I fell in love. He fell in lust. There's a difference. Took me a while to figure that out." Victoria's smile was bitter. "By the time I did, I was pregnant, and everything went to hell." She poured herself another drink. "I told Harrison in January of '72. Thought he'd be scared, maybe. Thought we'd figure it out together. Instead, he told me to get rid of it. Said a baby would destroy both our careers. When I refused, he went to his father." "Senator Blackwell," Wyatt said. "The elder Blackwell. Old money, old power. The kind of man who'd spent his whole life making problems disappear. He flew to Berlin personally, met with me in a safe house near the wall. Told me very clearly that his son's future was more important than mine. That I would terminate the pregnancy or I would be terminated. Career, reputation, maybe life. His words, not mine." Max's hands tightened around her glass. "What did you do?" "I told him to go to hell. Stupid, arrogant. I was 22, and I thought being right mattered more than being smart." Victoria shook her head. "Within a week, my cover was blown. The Stasi identified me. My sources went dark. Someone leaked my real identity to the East German intelligence service. I was recalled to Washington under emergency protocols. Blackwell sold you out, Wyatt said. Either him or his father, doesn't matter which. The result was the same. I was pulled out of Berlin, debriefed, and quietly told that my services were no longer required. They gave me a choice: resign voluntarily or face charges for operational security violations they'd manufacture. I was 7 months pregnant and facing court-martial. So you agreed. I agreed to resign after the baby was born. Agreed to give the child up for adoption through military channels. Agreed to sign confidentiality agreements that would prevent me from ever discussing my work in Berlin. In exchange, I'd get an honorable discharge and a small pension. My record would be sealed but not destroyed. I could move on with my life. Victoria drained her glass and poured another. They put me in Walter Reed under a false name, kept me isolated, no visitors except medical staff. When my daughter was born on March 15th, they let me hold her for exactly 10 minutes, long enough to see her face, long enough to count her fingers and toes, long enough to memorize that birthmark on her wrist. Her voice cracked slightly. She steadied it. Then they gave me a sedative, told me it was for the pain. When I woke up 12 hours later, a doctor I'd never seen before told me there had been complications, that my daughter had died shortly after birth, that they'd already completed the burial at Arlington, that I should focus on recovering and moving forward. Max felt something twist in her chest. You believed them? Why wouldn't I? They showed me paperwork, death certificate, burial plot number, everything official, everything stamped and signed and filed properly. I was 23 years old and I just lost everything. My career, my daughter, my future. I didn't have the strength to question it. What happened after? I had a breakdown, spent 3 months in a psychiatric facility. When I was released, the Army gave me my discharge papers and a check for $20,000. Hush money. I signed the confidentiality agreement because I didn't have a choice. And then I disappeared. Victoria moved back to the window. I changed my name, got a PhD, tried to build a new life, but I couldn't let it go. Couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, about whether I'd been too weak, too trusting, too stupid. So I studied, read everything I could about military operations, intelligence work, political power, wrote papers that got attention. And when the Army came calling in 1985, offering me a consultant position, I took it. You came back for revenge, Wyatt said. I came back for answers. Revenge was secondary. I rebuilt my career slowly, carefully, made myself invaluable, worked my way up the chain of command, made general last year, and then I started asking questions, quiet questions, about Operation Homecoming, about what really happened in March 1973. She turned to face them. I found gaps in the records, inconsistencies, files that should exist but don't, burial records that don't match cemetery logs. And then 3 months ago, I saw Lieutenant Maxwell Hartford's personnel file cross my desk. Born March 15, 1973, parents listed as Garrett and Helen Prescott. And that birthmark. Max stood, walked to the window beside Victoria. They were the same height, similar build. Standing side by side, the resemblance was undeniable. Why didn't you say something? Max asked. When you saw me on base, when I was teaching Emma, why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't sure, because I couldn't prove it, and because, Victoria's voice dropped, because I was afraid that if I was wrong, I'd lose you again, and afraid that if I was right, you'd hate me for giving you up. You didn't give me up, they took me. I let them. I was young and scared, and I let powerful men tell me what to do. I should have fought harder, should have questioned the death certificate, should have burned down every building in Washington until I got my daughter back. But I didn't. I signed the papers and I walked away. Max turned to face her. Garrett didn't walk away. He was supposed to kill me. Instead, he saved me, raised me, gave me everything. I know. I've spent the last 3 months reading everything I could find about Garrett Prescott, about who he was, what he did, and I know he was a better parent than I ever could have been. That's not what I... It's the truth, Lieutenant. I was a coward. He was a hero. End of story. The office went quiet. Outside, a drill instructor's voice echoed across the parade ground, Marines responding in unison. The rhythm of military life continuing regardless of personal drama. Wyatt cleared his throat. General, we need to discuss the current threat. Blackwell's people tried to access Prescott's files. That means they know something. Maybe not everything, but enough to be worried. Victoria nodded. They know Prescott is dead. They're trying to determine what he might have left behind. Evidence, documents, proof that connects them to the events of 1973. Did he have proof? Max asked. I don't know. Do you? Max thought about the box, the photographs, the documents in foreign languages. The key with the number 247. Maybe. There's a key I found, hidden in his filing cabinet. Number 247. Could be a safe deposit box, could be a storage unit. We need to find out what it opens, Wyatt said, before Blackwell's people do. Victoria moved to her desk and picked up the phone, dialed a number from memory. This is General Rothschild. I need a security detail assigned to Lieutenant Maxwell Hartford, effective immediately. Level 3, protection. Authorization code Delta 77 Alpha. She paused, listening. I don't care about approval processes. This is a matter of national security. Get it done. She hung up and looked at Max. You're under military protection as of now. Blackwell can't touch you on base without going through official channels. That buys us time. Time for what? Time to figure out what that key opens. Time to gather evidence. And time to decide what we're going to do about Senator Harrison Blackwell. Max's phone buzzed. She pulled it out and saw a text from a number she didn't recognize. Lieutenant Hartford, we need to talk. Regarding your father's estate. Meet me at the Starbucks on Route 1 at 1600. Come alone. David Reeves. She showed the phone to Victoria and Wyatt. Who's David Reeves? Victoria asked. I don't know. Never heard of him. Wyatt took the phone and pulled up a search. David Reeves, age 32, works for the Department of Defense, Inspector General's office, specializes in investigating fraud and corruption in military contracts. IG office, Victoria said slowly. That's not good. Why not? Max asked. Because if the Inspector General is involved, that means someone filed a complaint. Someone with enough evidence to trigger an official investigation. And if they're investigating your father's contracts, they're looking for something specific. Wyatt scrolled through more information. According to his profile, Reeves has been working a case involving Pentagon contractors for the last 8 years. No details on what specifically, but 8 years is a long time to investigate anything. Too long, Victoria agreed, unless the investigation is personal. Max looked at the text again. You think this is a trap? I think you don't go to that meeting without backup, and you definitely don't go alone. But if he has information about Garrett, then he can share it through official channels, in a secure location, with witnesses present. Victoria's tone left no room for argument. You're not taking unnecessary risks, Lieutenant, not while people are actively trying to silence you. As if on cue, Max's phone rang. Unknown number, she answered on speaker. Lieutenant Hartford? A man's voice, deep, confident, familiar in a way that made Max's skin crawl. Who is this? My name is Harrison Blackwell. I believe we need to have a conversation. The room went still. Victoria's expression hardened into something dangerous. Wyatt's hand moved instinctively toward where his sidearm would be, if he were carrying one. Max kept her voice steady. Senator Blackwell, this is unexpected. I imagine it is. I'm calling because I understand you've been asking questions about events from 1973. Events that are classified under national security protocols. I wanted to reach out personally to clarify a few things. I'm listening. First, I want to express my condolences about Major Prescott. I understand he was important to you. Losing a parent is never easy. Thank you. Second, I want to assure you that any documents or materials related to his military service are protected by federal law. Attempting to access or distribute such materials could constitute a serious crime. I'm sure you understand the implications. Max looked at Victoria. Her mother's eyes were blazing with barely controlled fury. Are you threatening me, Senator? I'm offering you guidance, Lieutenant. As someone who cares about our military and the young people who serve in it, your career is just beginning. You have a bright future ahead of you. It would be unfortunate if misguided curiosity about the past jeopardized that future. Noted. There's one more thing. I understand you've had contact with General Rothschild. I'd advise caution there. The general has a complicated history. Not everyone who wears stars deserves the respect that comes with them. Some people carry grudges that cloud their judgment. Victoria stepped forward. This is General Rothschild, Senator, and I suggest you be very careful about what you say next. Silence on the line, then a laugh. Cold, calculating. Victoria, it's been a long time. Not long enough. I see you've been telling stories, poisoning Lieutenant Hartford against me. That's disappointing. I thought you'd moved past all that unpleasantness. Unpleasantness? That's what you call trying to murder your own daughter. I don't have a daughter, General. I have a career, a family, a future, and I'm not going to let ghosts from the past destroy any of that. Neither should you. Is that a threat? It's a fact. You're a smart woman, Victoria, smart enough to know that some doors are better left closed, smart enough to understand that opening them could hurt more people than just me. Think about Emma. Think about what happens to her if your past becomes public. If people learn what you did, how you manipulated that adoption, how you used money and influence to take a child that wasn't yours. Victoria's face went pale. Max grabbed the phone. Senator, this conversation is over. And if you contact me or General Rothschild again, I'll be filing a formal complaint with whom, Lieutenant? Your chain of command? I have friends in the Pentagon, friends in Congress, friends in places you can't imagine. You're a first lieutenant, a nobody. No offense intended, but that's the reality. You can't fight people like me. You don't have the resources. You don't have the protection. And you certainly don't have the evidence. Maybe I do. A pause. I don't think so. Garrett Prescott was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He knew that keeping evidence would be signing his own death warrant. Whatever you found in his personal effects, it's not enough. It'll never be enough. Then why are you calling? Because I'm a reasonable man. Because I believe in solving problems before they become crises. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to forget about Operation Homecoming. You're going to stop digging into classified files. You're going to live your life, serve your country, and build a career you can be proud of. And in exchange, I'll make sure certain people don't learn about General Rothschild's adoption irregularities. I'll make sure Emma gets to stay with her mother. I'll make sure everyone gets what they want. Accept justice, Max said. Justice is a luxury, Lieutenant. Survival is a necessity. Choose wisely. The line went dead. Max set the phone down carefully. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. He knows about Emma, Victoria said quietly. About the surrogacy, the sealed adoption records. How does he know? Because he's been watching you, Wyatt said. Probably since you came back into the military. People like Blackwell don't leave loose ends. They monitor them, control them, and when the time is right, they eliminate them. Victoria sank into her chair. For the first time since Max had entered the office, the general looked defeated. He's right. About Emma. If the truth about her adoption comes out, I'll lose her. The courts will review the case, find the irregularities, the money I paid, the strings I pulled. They'll call it fraud, trafficking. They'll take her away. So we give him what he wants, Max said. We walk away. We let him win. No, Victoria's voice was firm. We fight, but we fight smart. We find evidence he can't deny. We build a case he can't destroy. And we make sure that when we move against him, it's final. Wyatt stood. Then we start with that key. Find out what Prescott was hiding. If it's enough to take down Blackwell, we use it. If it's not, we regroup. Max pulled out the key, studied it again. The number 247. Where would Garrett have put a safe deposit box? What bank would he have trusted? Then she remembered. A conversation from years ago. She'd been 16, asking Garrett about money and savings and financial planning. He'd told her about the importance of keeping certain documents secure, had mentioned a bank in Alexandria where he'd maintained an account since before she was born. First National Bank of Alexandria, the oldest bank in the city. The kind of place that valued discretion and tradition. I know where it is, she said. Victoria stood. Then we go. Now, before Blackwell's people figure it out. General, with respect, you can't come, Wyatt said. If Blackwell is watching Max, he's definitely watching you. We need to move quietly. Just me and Hartford. Absolutely not. She's my daughter. I'm not sending her into danger without backup. I know. That's why I'm going with her. But you need to stay here. Maintain your normal routine. Give us cover. If anyone asks, Lieutenant Hartford is running a personal errand with my assistance. Nothing suspicious. Victoria looked like she wanted to argue. Then she closed her eyes and nodded. Fine, but you keep her safe, Captain. That's an order. Yes, ma'am. Max walked to Victoria, stood facing her for a long moment. Then impulsively, she hugged her. It was awkward. Neither of them quite knew how to position their arms. But Victoria held on tight, and Max felt something inside her chest crack open. I'll be careful, Max whispered. You'd better be. I just got you back. I'm not losing you again. They separated. Victoria's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Go. Find what Prescott left behind, and bring me something I can use to destroy Harrison Blackwell. Max and Wyatt left the office. Behind them, Victoria returned to her desk and picked up the phone again. Max heard her voice, firm and commanding, issuing orders to someone about security protocols and threat assessments. Being a general, being a mother, trying to be both at the same time. They drove to Alexandria in Wyatt's truck. The November afternoon was cold and gray, the kind of weather that made Virginia feel more like winter than autumn. Max watched the landscape pass, her mind racing through everything she'd learned in the last hour. Victoria was her mother. Blackwell was her father. Garrett had saved her by kidnapping her. Helen had lied for 26 years. Emma wasn't Victoria's biological daughter, but another child stolen to fill the void Max had left. It was too much, too complicated, too broken to ever fix properly. You okay? Wyatt asked. No, but I will be. That's not how trauma works, Hartford. You don't just push through this kind of thing. Watch me. He sighed. You're as stubborn as she is. You know that? Who, Victoria? Yeah, she's been investigating Blackwell for years, quietly, carefully, building a case she could never use because she didn't have proof, just suspicions and sealed records. Now you show up and suddenly everything she's been working toward is within reach. You think she's using me. I think she's a mother who lost her daughter and a general who wants justice. Sometimes those things align, sometimes they don't. You need to be ready for that possibility. Max didn't answer. She wasn't sure what to say. First National Bank of Alexandria was a 3-story brick building downtown, nestled between a coffee shop and a law office. Old money, old families. The kind of institution that had survived wars and depressions and cultural revolutions by simply refusing to change. Inside, the lobby was all dark wood and brass fixtures. A security guard nodded at them from his station. A teller helped an elderly woman with a deposit. Everything quiet, everything normal. Max approached the customer service desk, showed her military ID and the key. I need to access a safe deposit box. Number 247. The account holder was Garrett Prescott. He passed away last week. The banker, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain, examined the key and the ID. I'm sorry for your loss. Do you have documentation showing you're authorized to access the box? Max pulled out Garrett's death certificate and a copy of his will. Helen had given her the will 3 days ago. It was simple. Everything to his wife and daughter. No complications. The banker reviewed the documents. This all appears to be in order. If you'll follow me. They descended a staircase to the basement. The vault was old but well maintained. Rows of safe deposit boxes lined the walls, ranging from small to large. Box 247 was medium-sized, located in the middle of the third row. The banker inserted the bank's key. Max inserted Garrett's key. Both turned together. The box slid out. I'll give you privacy, the banker said, and left them alone in the viewing room. Max set the box in the table. Wyatt stood beside her. Neither of them moved for a moment. Whatever's in here, Wyatt said quietly, it's going to change things. You ready for that? Max opened the box. Inside, documents, photographs, USB drives, and a letter addressed to her in Garrett's handwriting. She picked up the letter with shaking hands. The envelope was sealed. The paper was thick, quality, like Garrett had known this would be important, had known someday she'd be standing here, reading his words. She broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Maxwell, if you're reading this, I'm dead. And if I'm dead, it means you've started asking questions. Questions I should have answered years ago but didn't because I was a coward. The truth is this, I was hired to kill you in March of 1973. Paid $50,000 by a man who wanted to erase a mistake, a baby that shouldn't have existed, a complication that threatened his political future. I said yes, took the money, went to Walter Reed with every intention of completing the job. But when I saw you, this tiny, perfect thing with your whole life ahead of you, I couldn't do it. I'd done terrible things in my life, things I'm not proud of, but I couldn't kill a baby. So I took you instead. Helen helped me. We forged documents, created a paper trail, made you ours legally in every way that mattered to the courts. And we loved you. God help me, we loved you more than anything. But love doesn't erase theft, and theft is what it was. I stole you from your real mother, from a woman who deserved better than what I gave her, from a woman who thought you were dead for 26 years. I'm sorry, Max. Sorry for lying. Sorry for stealing you. Sorry for building your life on a foundation of crimes and secrets. You deserve better. You deserved the truth. In this box, you'll find evidence, photographs, documents, recordings, everything I gathered over the years about Operation Homecoming, about Harrison Blackwell, about what really happened in March of 1973. Use it however you see fit. Destroy Blackwell. Protect Victoria. Make things right in whatever way you can. Or walk away. Burn it all. Live your life. Be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. You're a good Marine, Max. A good person. Better than I ever was. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. Semper Fi, Garrett. Max set the letter down. Her vision was blurred. She wiped her eyes roughly. Wyatt squeezed her shoulder. Take your time. She pulled out the documents, bank records showing payments from a shell corporation to Garrett Prescott in March 1973. $50,000 transferred in 3 installments. The shell corporation traced back to a law firm in Washington that specialized in discreet services for wealthy clients. And the client who'd established the shell corporation was listed in handwritten notes, Senator Thomas Blackwell. Payment authorized for contract work, Project Homecoming. Photographs showing Garrett at Walter Reed, entering the maternity ward, leaving with a bundle wrapped in blankets. Time-stamped, dated undeniable. A sworn affidavit from Helen Prescott, written years later, detailing her role in the kidnapping. Notarized, witnessed, legal. Audio recordings. Garrett's voice describing meetings with the elder Blackwell. Conversations about eliminating the problem. Instructions on how to make it look like a natural death. The cold calculus of wealthy men who saw people as obstacles to be removed. And video, grainy, old, but clear enough. A conversation between young Harrison Blackwell and an unidentified man in what looked like a parking garage. Harrison saying, "I don't care how you do it, just make sure there's no trail. My father's paying you enough to be thorough." The unidentified man was Garrett. "This is it," Wyatt breathed. "This is everything. Blackwell ordered the hit. His father paid for it. Garrett documented all of it. This would destroy him, end his campaign, probably send him to prison." Max stared at the evidence. 26 years of secrets. 26 years of lies. All neatly organized in a safe deposit box, waiting for her to decide what to do with it. She could destroy Blackwell, ruin him, make him pay for trying to have her killed, for betraying Victoria, for all of it. But there was always a but. "If we release this," she said slowly, "it doesn't just destroy Blackwell, it destroys Victoria too." Wyatt frowned. "What do you mean?" "The affidavit from Helen mentions Victoria by name, describes the pregnancy, the sedation, the lies about the baby's death. If this becomes public, people will start asking questions. Why didn't Victoria fight harder? Why did she believe them so easily? Why didn't she demand to see the body? That's not her fault." "No, but it'll be spun that way. And then they'll dig deeper. They'll find out about Emma, about the surrogacy, the sealed adoption, the money Victoria paid, and they'll take Emma away from her. They'll call Victoria a child trafficker, an unfit parent. They'll destroy her the same way we'd be destroying Blackwell." Wyatt leaned against the table. "So what are you saying? We can't use this?" "I'm saying we need to be smart. We need to find a way to take down Blackwell without burning Victoria in the process." "I don't know if that's possible, Hartford. This evidence is connected. You can't separate one part of the story from the other." Max's phone buzzed. Text from the unknown number again. "David Reeves. I know you found Prescott's box. I know what's in it. We need to talk. Today. This isn't a request." She showed it to Wyatt. "How does he know?" Wyatt demanded. "I don't know, but if he knows about the box, he knows about the evidence, which means he might have his own leverage. Or he's working for Blackwell. Maybe, or maybe he's the key to solving this without destroying everyone in the process." Wyatt shook his head. "This is a bad idea." "Probably, but it's the only idea we've got." Max texted back. "Where and when?" The response was immediate. "Parking lot behind your building. 1 hour. Come alone. Hartford only." She looked at Wyatt. "I need to do this." "Not alone, you don't." He specifically said, "I don't care what he said. You're not meeting a potentially hostile contact in a parking lot without backup. I'll stay out of sight, but I'm coming." Max wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Knew that walking into unknown situations alone was how Marines ended up dead. "Fine, but you stay hidden unless things go wrong." "Deal." They packed up the evidence. Max kept the letter. Everything else went back in the box, locked safely in the bank vault. They'd need it eventually, but not yet. Not until they understood all the players, all the angles. The drive back to Quantico took 40 minutes. The sun was starting to set, painting the Virginia sky in shades of orange and red. Max thought about Garrett, about Helen, about Victoria and Emma and Harrison Blackwell, and all the lies that had been told to protect secrets that should never have existed in the first place. Somewhere in all of this was a path forward, a way to make things right. She just had to find it. They arrived at her building at 17:30. The parking lot was mostly empty. Most Marines were at chow or physical training. Wyatt parked 2 rows away, positioning himself where he could see Max, but wouldn't be immediately visible. "Comm check," he said, handing her an earpiece. She fitted it in her ear. "Check. I've got eyes on the lot. If anyone approaches who isn't Reeves, I'm moving in." "Roger that." Max got out of the truck and walked to her assigned parking spot. Waited. The air was cold. Quiet, the kind of quiet that felt wrong. Too still, too empty. At exactly 1800 hours, a dark sedan pulled into the lot. Civilian plates, government vehicle. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. David Reeves looked nothing like Max had expected. He was young, early 30s maybe, with dark hair cut military short and a face that had seen too much stress. He wore a suit that didn't fit quite right, moved like someone who'd had tactical training but hadn't used it in a while. He approached carefully, hands visible, non-threatening. "Lieutenant Hartford, Mr. Reeves, you've been very insistent about talking to me because I've been trying to save your life for the last 8 years." Max blinked. "Excuse me?" Reeves glanced around the parking lot. "Not here. Get in the car." "I'm not getting in a car with someone I don't know." "Then we stand here and have this conversation in the open, where anyone with a long-range microphone can listen in. Your choice." In her ear, Wyatt's voice. "Hartford, I don't like this." Max didn't either, but something in Reeves' expression, desperation mixed with determination, made her hesitate. "2 minutes," she said, "and I'm armed." "So am I. Doesn't mean I'm going to use it." They got in the car. Reeves started the engine, but didn't drive. Just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. "My father was Captain Michael Reeves," he said finally. "U.S. Army, intelligence officer. He worked with your mother, Victoria Rothschild, in East Germany in 1972. They were both part of the same operation, both gathering intel on Soviet military installations. And both got burned when someone leaked their identities to the Stasi." Max's pulse quickened. Blackwell. Harrison Blackwell and his father. They sold out the entire network to protect Harrison's career. Victoria escaped because she was pregnant, and they pulled her out early. But my father wasn't so lucky. The East Germans arrested him in April of '72, charged him with espionage. He spent 18 months in a Stasi prison before the U.S. negotiated his release. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He survived, came home, got out of the army and tried to rebuild his life. But he never forgot what happened, never forgot who betrayed him. He spent the rest of his life gathering evidence against the Blackwells, documented everything, built a case that should have sent them both to prison." "What happened to the case?" "My father died in 1991, car accident, except it wasn't an accident. Brake lines cut, witnesses who disappeared, evidence that vanished. The Blackwells killed him before he could go public." Reeves turned to look at Max. "I was 18 when my father died, and I spent the next 14 years doing exactly what he did, gathering evidence, building a case, working for the Inspector General's office so I'd have access to the files I needed. And 8 years ago, I found something, a connection between Garrett Prescott and Operation Homecoming, between Prescott and you." Max's throat was dry. "You've been watching me. I've been protecting you, because I knew that if the Blackwells ever figured out you were alive, they'd try to finish what they started in 1973. I've been running interference, blocking inquiries, redirecting investigations, keeping your name out of reports that might raise flags." "Why?" "Because my father died trying to expose these people, and I'm not going to let his death be meaningless. Because you're the proof, the living, breathing evidence that Harrison Blackwell ordered a murder, that he's been covering it up for 26 years, that everything he says about honor and service and American values is a lie." In Max's ear, "Hartford, this guy is either telling the truth or he's the best liar I've ever heard. I can't tell which." Max couldn't either, but she knew one thing. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to testify, under oath, in front of Congress. Tell your story, show the evidence Prescott left behind. Destroy Blackwell before he becomes president. And what happens to Victoria? To Emma? Reeves' expression softened. I know about Emma, about the adoption, about what Victoria did. And I'm telling you right now, I don't care. She was a victim. She lost her daughter because of Blackwell's betrayal. What she did after was grief. Trauma. It wasn't right, but it wasn't evil. I won't let her be collateral damage in this. You can't promise that. Once this becomes public, you can't control the narrative. No, but I can control the evidence. I can make sure certain documents don't surface. Certain connections don't get made. I've been doing it for 8 years. I can keep doing it. Max studied his face, looking for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was another trap. She didn't see any. I need time, she said, to think about this, to talk to Victoria, to make sure we're doing this right. We don't have time. Blackwell knows you found Prescott's evidence. He's moving against you right now, against Victoria, against anyone who could expose him. If we don't move first, we won't get another chance. How long? 24 hours, maybe less. After that, I can't protect you. None of us can. Max opened the car door. I'll have an answer by tomorrow morning. Hartford, tomorrow morning, Mr. Reeves. I'm not making this decision in a parking lot based on fear. She got out. Reeves didn't try to stop her, just watched as she walked back to Wyatt's truck. Wyatt started the engine immediately. Talk to me. He's telling the truth, or he's the best con artist in history. Either way, we need to talk to Victoria. Now. They drove back to headquarters, found Victoria still in her office, still working, still wearing the same expression of controlled fury she'd had all day. Max told her everything, about the evidence in the box, about Reeves, about the choice they had to make. When she finished, Victoria stood and walked to her window, looked out at Quantico one more time. If we do this, she said quietly, Emma loses me. The courts will review the adoption, find the irregularities, take her away. Reeves says he can protect that information. And you believe him? I don't know, but I believe we can't let Blackwell win. I believe that sometimes the right thing costs more than we want to pay. Victoria was silent for a long time. Then she turned around. I've spent 26 years living with what I lost, with the daughter they took from me. I built a new life, a new career. I found Emma and I loved her with everything I had. And now I have to choose, keep the daughter I found or save the daughter I lost. You're not losing me, Max said. No matter what happens, I'm here, I'm staying. You say that now, but when this becomes public, when you learn all the ugly details about who I was and what I did, you might change your mind. I won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because I'm a Marine, and Marines don't abandon their own. You're my mother. That matters. All the rest, the lies, the mistakes, the broken pieces, we'll figure it out. Together. Victoria's composure finally broke. She crossed the room and pulled Max into a fierce embrace, held on like she was afraid to let go. Semper Fidelis, she whispered. Always faithful, Max whispered back. They stood there for a long moment, mother and daughter, general and lieutenant, two women who'd lost everything and found each other in the ruins. Finally, Victoria pulled back, wiped her eyes, straightened her uniform. All right, we do this. We bring down Blackwell, and we deal with the consequences after. What about Emma? Victoria's smile was sad. I'll talk to her. Tonight, tell her the truth. That sometimes loving someone means letting them go. That her mother loved her enough to fight for her, even if it meant losing her. That's not fair. No, but it's right. And right matters more than fair. Wyatt cleared his throat. General, if we're doing this, we need to move fast. Reeves gave us 24 hours. I suggest we use them to prepare. Get the evidence organized. Brief legal counsel. Make sure when we go public, we do it right. Victoria nodded. Agreed. Hartford, you work with Reeves. Get everything documented. I'll coordinate with JAG and media relations. We control the narrative from the start. Yes, ma'am. They worked through the night. Max met with Reeves, provided copies of everything from Prescott's safe deposit box, sat through interview after interview, telling her story over and over until every detail was documented. Wyatt coordinated with military legal authorities, ensured the evidence chain was unbroken, protected Max's identity as long as possible before the story went public. Victoria prepared Emma, held her daughter, explained that sometimes parents made mistakes, that sometimes loving someone meant making hard choices. Emma cried. Victoria cried, but they held each other until morning came. At 0600, David Reeves held a press conference, stood in front of cameras and reporters, and told the world about Operation Homecoming, about Harrison Blackwell's betrayal, about the attempted murder of an infant. By 0800, Blackwell's campaign was in freefall. His poll numbers collapsed. His donors fled. His political allies turned against him. By noon, federal prosecutors announced an investigation. By 1800, Blackwell withdrew from the presidential race. And by the end of the week, he was arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit murder. The fallout was massive. Media coverage around the clock, congressional hearings, public outrage. Everything Max had known would happen. But through it all, she stood firm, testified, told the truth. Let the world see what powerful men did to protect their interests. Victoria stood beside her, faced her own consequences. The adoption irregularities came to light, as everyone knew they would. The courts reviewed Emma's case, found the legal violations, prepared to remove her from Victoria's custody until Emma herself testified, stood in front of a judge and said that Victoria was her mother, that she didn't care about biology or paperwork or anything else, that she wanted to stay. And the judge, a woman who'd served in the military herself, who understood sacrifice and duty and the complicated nature of love, ruled in Victoria's favor, sealed the adoption records, made it final and legal and unbreakable. 6 months later, Max stood in Victoria's backyard in suburban Virginia. A small gathering. Wyatt was there, David Reeves, Helen Prescott, thin and frail from her cancer but alive and fighting. Emma, Victoria smiled. Our daughter. They stood in comfortable silence. Two women who'd been broken and had rebuilt themselves into something stronger, something better. Helen approached them slowly, leaning on a cane. Her hair was completely white now. Her face showed every one of her 53 years, but her eyes were clear, determined. I need to say something, Helen said. Her voice was weak but steady. To both of you. Max and Victoria turned to face her. I've spent 6 months trying to find the right words, trying to figure out how to apologize for what I did, for the lies I told, for the life I stole. Helen looked at Victoria. I took your daughter, helped my husband kidnap her, raised her as my own while you grieved. There's no apology big enough for that, no forgiveness I deserve. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and took Helen's hand. You saved her, Victoria said simply. Garrett was supposed to kill her. You helped him save her instead. You gave her a good life, a loving home. You raised her to be strong and brave and good. That matters. Maybe it doesn't erase what you did, but it matters. Helen's eyes filled with tears. I loved her. God help me, I loved her like she was mine. I know, I can see it, in the way she talks about you, in the way she still calls you mom. Love like that, real love, it doesn't lie, even when everything else does. Max moved to stand between them, put one hand on Victoria's shoulder, one hand on Helen's. I had two mothers, she said, one who gave me life, one who gave me a childhood. Both of you shaped who I am. Both of you matter. And I'm not choosing between you. I'm keeping both of you, whether you like it or not." Victoria laughed through her tears. "Stubborn, just like me." "And me," Helen added with a weak smile. Emma ran over, the puppy bounding beside her. "Mom! Max! Come see what Charlie learned." She grabbed Victoria's hand and Max's hand, pulling them toward the far end of the yard, where the puppy was chasing a tennis ball. Victoria let herself be pulled along, looked back at Max, mouthed the words, "Thank you." Max nodded, followed them into the gathering dusk. Wyatt appeared beside her with 2 beers, handed her one. "You did good, Hartford, really good." "We all did, couldn't have done it without you." "I was just support." "You were the one who stood up there and told the truth, who faced down a senator and a scandal and came out the other side." "I had help." Max took a drink, watched Emma play with the puppy, watched Victoria laugh, really laugh, freely and without restraint, for the first time since Max had met her. "What now?" Wyatt asked. "Back to regular duty? Forget all this happened?" "I don't think I can forget. Don't think I want to. But yeah, back to duty. Back to being a Marine. That's who I am. That's what matters." "You ever think about what you lost? The normal life you could have had if none of this had happened?" Max considered the question, looked around the yard, at Victoria and Emma and Helen and David Reeves, who was helping Emma teach the puppy to sit, at Wyatt beside her, at this strange, broken, beautiful family they'd built from the wreckage of secrets and lies. "No," she said finally, "I don't think about what I lost. I think about what I found." Emma ran back over. "Max, will you teach me how to throw a football? Mom says you were really good in high school." Max grinned. "Your mom told you about that? She tells me lots of things about you. Says you're the bravest person she knows." Max looked at Victoria, who was watching them with an expression of such pure love and pride that it made Max's chest ache. "Come on," Max said to Emma. "Let's see if you've got an arm." They moved to an open space. Max showed Emma how to grip the ball, how to step into the throw, how to follow through. Basic mechanics. But also more than that, a connection, a bond. An aunt teaching her niece, a sister teaching her sister, a family being a family. Victoria joined them, caught the wobbly passes Emma threw, laughed when the puppy intercepted one and ran off with it, stood beside Max and watched Emma chase the dog around the yard. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me this, for giving me a second chance, for forgiving me when I didn't deserve it. You're my mother. That's not something I can choose. It just is. And honestly, I'm glad it is." Victoria's hand found Max's, squeezed. They stood together as the sun finally set below the horizon, as the stars began to appear overhead, as the Virginia night settled in around them, cool and clear and full of possibilities. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. To the truth, to each other. To the bonds that held them together, even when everything else fell apart. Max thought about Garrett one last time. Hoped he could see this, could see what his sacrifice had created, could know that in the end, love had won. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but decisively. And in the gathering darkness, surrounded by family, chosen and biological, broken and whole, imperfect but trying, Max Hartford finally felt like she'd come home. The end.